Okay. And of course, I'm on the very last slide. There we go. Okay. All righty here. Okay. So, how we know the truth about God? So, it may seem pretty simple. Some people just say, "Well, I just have faith." That's how I know things about God. That's why we have faith. But we got to go into it much deeper tonight. There's a lot to it. Okay. So, I told you before that um, one of our favorite questions to ask on the campus that we do our ministry on, a couple campuses, is the "Does God exist?" question, and then we like to see what students say. And obviously, some of them mark yes, some of them mark no, some of them mark I don't know. But of course, it leads to really good discussions after that. And of course, we're going to ask them, why you said yes, why you say no, why you say I don't know. So it is the question of all questions. No doubt the question impacts all of mankind, whether there's a God and who is he and what does he want from us, obviously. Because God's existence is a is the gateway to how we view reality, how we view everything, right? It's a gateway to your worldview. It's a filter by it's just the foundation or the center point, of how we see everything. And so that's why it's such an important question. It impacts, how we view people, why we think they matter or don't matter. It impacts our morality and ethical choices. It impacts our view of where we come from. It tells us where we come from. If we don't know where we come from, we don't know anything, right? Because we need to know exactly where we came from and why we're here. Of course, where we're going, where we're headed, and certainly impacts our identity, who we are. People search all their lives to figure out who they are. There's so many self-help books out there, obviously, and so many books out there to help you with that. We know that people will gobble them up looking for answers like, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? What's my purpose? And so that's why the God's existence question is so important. It impacts so many areas of your life. And so that's why we ask that question on campus, because we use that a lot because we're trying to get students to see the importance of the question. Obviously, it's the most important question of all. Now, of course, just like anything in life, you when you talk about God with people or his existence, you always run into a wide variety of people. I mean, there's always going to be people that are truth seekers. Some people are seeking the truth. They want to know the truth. Of course, you run into some people that are apathetic. They just don't really care, or they're indifferent, right? They're just kind of like, yeah, maybe there's a God. I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure. I'm too busy. I got things to do. I got money to make. I got a relationship. I've got goals. I've got a lot going on, and I just don't have time to think about it. So they just stay really busy and they're consumed with busyness and distraction, right? And we know that those two things are what the enemy of our soul uses. He uses busyness and distraction all the time. That's how he keeps people away from the God question. Of course, this day and age, we have so much technology that you could be distracted just permanently all the time. So, those are kinds of people we always encounter. At least I've encountered. I'm sure you have as well. You've run into people that may be asking you questions or may care, whether God does exist. And of course, you probably run into people who are apathetic and different and busy and just distracted. That's the way it is. We know that, like I said, if you blow off the God question and you don't care whether God exists, then you're really just going to navigate reality on your own. I mean, you're going to have your own view of reality. You're going to form your own views. You think everything's centered around you, and you are the most important thing, right? I ran into that a couple of weeks ago with a student. She's like, "Yeah, I'm just pretty much determine everything myself." But it's hard to make sense of reality without God. It's hard to make sense of all those issues I mentioned without God in the mix. Just the way it is. I mean, obviously you can try to, and people are trying to, but we know people come to the end of the line sometimes and they just fail and give up. And we know that obviously There's issues of spiritual blindness. We know that the Bible teaches us that people are blinded to the light of the gospel. People are blinded to the spiritual truths that the Bible teaches. And we know that God has commissioned us to go share the gospel, but we know that in general, you're talking to some people, you can just see the blindness when you're talking to them. It's just clear as day. If that person is not seeing the truth, they're not getting it right. It's not getting through to them. That's not your fault necessarily. But same token, that's the way we all were before we came to faith, right? We were all spiritually blinded. Now, sometimes you deal with agnostics. I deal with more agnostics these days than I used to. I used to deal with a lot more atheists on campus, but it seems like it's not quite as many atheists as there used to be. I think kind of atheism is kind of just merged into more agnosticism. Not that I'm dealing with hundreds and hundreds of agnostics, but I'm saying I just don't run into quite as many atheists. Now, I've talked before about Jewish people. A lot of Jewish people are agnostic. They don't really know whether there is a personal God and they haven't been taught much about it. Some of them just don't know. So, sometimes an agnostic would say, I just don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure maybe if there is a God. I don't know if we can know anything about this God. I don't know if we can know the truth about God. Or when they say I don't know, they're basically saying I'm not sure we can have knowledge of God. That's what it means to know, right? Knowledge. Of course, the Greek word is gnosis, but I'm saying um, if I have a friend, if I know John, well, let's just say Glenn. I was in Israel with him. He's on this call. I know Glenn. How do I know Glenn? Well, that means I have knowledge about Glenn, right? I've met him, I've talked to him, I've communicated with him, he's communicated with me. So now I have knowledge of Glenn, and he has knowledge of me. Okay. Before I had no knowledge of Glenn. I had no idea who he was. I never met him, didn't know anything about him, right? So when people say they just don't know if God exists, they're kind of just saying, I don't have knowledge of God. I don't know how to have knowledge of God. I'm not sure, how we go about it. And then of course, what I always respond with is, do you want to know? Do you want to know? That's what we always say on campus when someone says, I'm agnostic, I don't know. We say, well, do you want to know? Or how would you know? How would you know that there's a God? How do you think we could know? All right. Sometimes it's easier to stay as an agnostic because staying in the agnostic land forever means you don't have to commit to anything. You just kind of sit around like, well, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's a God, I'm not sure. I'm just going to live my life. And maybe there's a God, maybe there isn't. I don't know. I'm just kind of agnostic. That's just kind of like a lazy way out. You never have to commit. And then sometimes, you can always say, as we do, can I share with you how we can have knowledge of God? How I think you can know? Would you be open to hearing about it? Uh, can't make them care. If they don't care, they don't care. But if they're open to talk about it, then you got an opening to go forward, right, and talk about it. Okay. Now, atheism is a little different. Atheism is more like the rejection of belief in any gods. They just don't believe in like immaterial things, gods, souls, immaterial spirits. Sometimes atheists may make a strong claim, or they may say, like I'm saying, I know no God exists. They might say, no, there's no God. God doesn't exist. Now, that's like a very strong claim. But sometimes they may just say, I just don't, I lack any belief in God or gods. I know that sounds kind of confusing. That's what they say. Or sometimes I find when I'm talking to people that proclaim to be atheists, they're really agnostics. If you talk to them and narrow it down a little more, they might say something like, well, I don't believe, no, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God, but I would never say we can know for sure there's no God. They'll say that. They'll just say, I just don't think we can know. I'm like, well, you sound more like an agnostic. I don't think you're, and sometimes they'll kind of concede that. They'll be like, maybe I am more agnostic. Yeah, I guess that's what I am. So it just depends. You have to define what they mean when they use these terms. And sometimes they may not even know themselves. Okay. Now, of course, God's existence always brings up issues of evidence. There's different kinds of evidence. There's historical evidence or scientific evidence. There's um, practical evidence, just like in daily living. There's um, evidence from all kinds of areas you can look at, but overall evidence is a body of facts that, of course, require human interpretation because everybody can look at the same evidence. Okay, no one's hiding anything. It's like the evidence is there. It's a question of what you're going to do with it. And of course, when people come to evidence and they look at it, they take their biases, they take their worldview, they take some assumptions, they may take life experiences and motivations. So that's why, it's not that evidence is objective, meaning that it's not based on um, like I said last week. I mean, obviously some evidence has nothing to do with how you feel about it. It has nothing to do with whether you believe it. I mean, it's just the issue you look at the evidence sometimes and then it's like, well, I don't like the consequences of what I'm seeing, so I'm not going to interpret it that way. But anytime a cold case detective goes into a room and finds a body that's laying on the ground with a gunshot wound or a knife stab in the back, they weren't there to see anything, but they have to collect the evidence, right? And then they're going to have to interpret that evidence, right? Just like science, science doesn't really say anything. Like I said last week, it's a body of facts or data, and then the scientists take that data and they interpret it, and then they present it to the country or the culture. They present it to the public. But so evidence is evidence. Nobody's hiding the evidence. The question of what we do with it when we look at it and we see it. But of course, we all have different presuppositions and biases. Sometimes we look at it. That doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that we have those issues. You can't get around them. So also, when you ever talk to somebody that says well, you can't prove God exists. You can't prove it one way or the other. So I'm just going to be agnostic and I just when I need proof. You always have to get them to define what they mean by proof. There's different kinds of proof, once again, and you always want to ask them what they mean. Does proving God's existence mean like just say, what do you mean by proof? That's all you have to ask them, obviously, because they might say scientific proof. They might say, I want, you know, a direct experience from God and God has to appear to me or something like that. That would prove existence. It doesn't mean you're going to follow him. Um, and also, there's a difference between proofs and persuasion. So you can present a proof to somebody. There's a lot of them, but once again, they may not find it persuasive. But the persuasion has nothing to do with the evidence. Persuasion is based on once again, their presuppositions, their bias, their worldview. Persuasion's more subjective. Okay. If someone says, I'm not persuaded by that, I always say, well, what's wrong with the argument? Show me what it is I'm presenting to you that what's wrong with it? Do you think it's like the evidence isn't there? Or do you think that it's like have I presented it in a way that it's not logical? I mean, what is it? Sometimes you just find out that it's just an issue of their own subjective bias. They're not persuaded. So you just have to kind of get behind them and ask them what they mean. Now, let's think about this. When you ask certain questions, you want to know things, just in life in general, right? We all go through questions that we ask. Like if you say, and you want to know the truth about something, right? What if you say, well, where's Kenya? If I'm at home and I'm doing some geography lessons with my son or just in general or teacher is and I say to the student, where's Kenya? And I'm saying, how would we know where Kenya is? Most likely the student's going to say, well, let's look at the map in the room, right? Or let's look at the globe. There may be a map on the wall or globe in the room, and that's where we find Kenya, right? That's how we know. Or look at an encyclopedia, maybe. Or look at a map on your phone, of course, right? In this day and age, you just Google it, right? Or if you say, did I leave the bedroom light on? That just requires you to go to see if the light's still on or ask someone else to do it, right? Or what is 12 times 12? That can be answered from memory, from multiplication tables, right? So you're basically have to think about that with God's existence. Like, what do we want to know and how can we know it? What do you want to know about God and how can it be known? So God is not the same he doesn't fit in the same category as the majority of things in our lives. He doesn't fit like everything in my room right now around me has physicality. It's physical, it's material. I can see it, I can touch it, I can measure it, I can do all that stuff, right? But God doesn't really fit into that category because God's not a physical thing. Okay. So some people get hung up on this, like, well, I want to see God. There's no evidence for God, and I can't see God. You're misunderstanding what you're trying to know something that is you're going about it the wrong way because your starting point's the wrong. You're assuming that God is like a table or a car or a house. You can just go physically measure it. He's not. He doesn't fit into that category. Okay, so something you might want to think about is once again, like relationships. I always say to students, how do you have knowledge of anyone? How do you come to know a person? How do you build any relationship you have in life? How do you build a friendship? How do you know any of your friends? How do you know? Did you come to know someone? And we know that the key is that, as everything, you have to initiate communication. If there's no communication, nobody knows anybody, right? You don't know a darn thing about anybody. Whether it be they email you, reach out to you through email, they find you online and they contact you, or they tell someone about you and someone contacts you, or they meet you at a party, meet you in public, meet you at work, college. We say, hey, let's get together, have coffee, whatever. The point is that we don't know anything about anyone unless we communicate. Okay, that's just the way life works. And when we communicate, we use different kinds of communication. Okay, we sometimes use visual communication. We obviously can, we can sometimes you're looking at artwork, you're in a museum, you see the artist, what they did, you look at their portraits, you maybe learn something about the artist. You look at, you go look at a certain something somebody's made, like a could be even like they or they say you read a book by somebody, or well, that falls under more written communication, but we learn about people through visual communication, no doubt about it. We learn about people through nonverbal communication, right? We talk about your body language is speaking. I can see your body language, it's just speaking volumes to me. I can tell. Or else, of course, we use written communication. We email, we text, we write. That's obvious. And then we listen. And then we have verbal communication. We actually verbally speak, right? So the question becomes, if God exists, how's he going to communicate with us? I mean, with humans, we don't know anything about each other unless we communicate. So are we going to know anything about God unless he communicates? And the question is, how would he decide to communicate? Doesn't he get to make the parameters, set up the parameters on how he's going to communicate, or do we demand to God how he should communicate? That's what we do. What atheists sometimes like, well, he could have done this differently. He should have done this. God should do that. And that's where we run into some challenges, right? Now, the question is, does God use the same kind of communication that we use with each other as humans? The answer is yes, he does. God uses visual communication, no doubt about it. We can look at things God has made visually, right? Which we'll talk about in this call. Not a lot of nonverbal communication with God. I don't really think God has a lot of body language or tone, or we don't really have that with God. So that one probably doesn't apply. Definitely written communication. We know that God has communicated through written communication, and listening. I mean, we think God is listening. Obviously, sometimes we pray, and of course, we think God's listening, and we listen to Him. And of course, there's verbal communication, right? Is God speaking verbally? Well, we believe he's verbally communicated through written communication. He's verbally communicated written through written communication. I mean, when you're reading the Bible, of course, you're hearing God speaking, not necessarily audibly, not necessarily, but in the word, he's speaking, right? But let's talk a little bit tonight about visual communication. That's what I want to focus on. Okay, let's stick with that form today. Now, as we know, biblically, we can't see God directly. As far as we can see biblically, there's no way for us to have a full blown appearance of God in being in his presence and handling it okay. I kind of look at the analogy like he's the sun. If you look straight at the sun forever, your eyes are going to burn out, right? And you go blind. So God, what he is, he's a different kind of being, as I said. His essence or nature is different than us. Okay, what he is and his nature. So the thing is that we have to ask how he would show himself and make himself knowable. It's up to him to do that, right? If we can't see him directly. Now, um, it's not that we can't use our five senses to know truth about God. We have perception. We can look at the world around us, as I'm talking about visual communication. God's given us smell and touch, and we can touch things. And obviously in the created order, we taste food, we hear, these. It's not that we can't use any of our senses just because we can't see God directly, right? Um, but let's look a little bit more at how God uses visual communication. Okay, meaning that something people can observe through something he's made. Is there something God has visually communicated through something physical, right? Not that he's physical, but he communicates through something he has made. Now, I said before that, God doesn't fit into these categories. Okay. He's not a table. He's not a car. He's not a house. You can't measure God. You can't put dimensions on him. You can't, you know, put physical, parameters on him. Okay. He's a non made, non physical being. Okay. He's unmade. He's not dependent on anything. He fits an entirely different category. Everything around me in this room I'm looking at in my house right now is made. It's made by somebody. It's got physicality to it. I can measure it. I can obviously see it, touch it, right? So it's just God is a different kind of being. Now, there's many things though that in reality we cannot see with our eyes and we accept as being true. You don't see these things directly with your eyes. You don't see electrons directly. You don't see protons directly. You don't see neutrons directly. You don't see individual atoms. You don't see electric fields, magnetic fields. You don't see gravitational fields directly. You don't even see justice directly. You only see the effects of justice. Okay. You don't see consciousness of other human beings. You don't see the wind directly. You see the effects of the wind when it's blowing on the leaves on your tree, and you don't even see the laws of logic directly. You see the effects of the laws of logic in every day and how we think and reason. Okay. So we see, as I said, we don't see things, we don't always have to see things directly to know they're there. Okay. We don't see any of these things directly through direct observation. We can't verify them directly. Okay. What we do is we infer their existence. Okay. For example, you infer the existence of electrons by the behavior of charged particles, or you can infer the existence of electric fields or magnetic fields by the behavior of charged particles, or you infer the existence of wind by seeing the branches on a tree moving, right? And that's the way it is with God. We don't see God directly, we see the effects of God. Okay. We infer the existence of God from his effects in the world. Okay. So someone says, do you how to know God exists? You start off with, well, we know God by his effects. Now, you're obviously then going to have to know some of his effects that you can talk about with people, because people, I don't see any of his effects. Well, you have to get them thinking about what that even means and what kind of effects they aren't even taking consideration of. They're living in God's world. They just don't even know it. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these effects tonight. We're not going to finish them all, but we're going to talk about something tonight. Okay. Of course, I've talked a little bit about this before, but it's always good to review. So when I talk about effects, if you see the effects of God, you see effects in the world, you ask, what is the cause of that effect? That's what cause and effect relationships are, right? So you say, here's an effect, and I reason back to a cause. What's the cause of that effect, right? If I'm sitting in my room right now and a baseball comes through the window and busts through the window, hits my bed, and it just sits on the bed. I don't think it's going to happen right now. It's 7:30 at night here and dark. But let's just say I'm sitting here during the day and a baseball comes flying through my window and breaks my window. I'm going to say, Well, there's the effect. I have a baseball on my bed with glass on the floor. What's the cause of that? I'm going to run over the window, look outside, and see if there's two kids playing baseball, or else maybe there's somebody who's decided to pull a prank and throw a baseball at Eric's house and break his window. But there is a cause by that effect behind that effect, no doubt about it. My job is to get to the cause part, right? I've already observed the effect. Okay. Now, as humans, um, we naturally we see design everywhere around us. Okay, we tend to observe a lot of the things in the world around us, and we infer that there must be some sort of intelligence behind a lot of the effects we see, some sort of designing intelligence. Um, and that is one thing, the most intuitive way a lot of people believe in some kind of God through design. Okay, it's just built in intuitively into humanity, as I'll talk about here. Um, just basic things. I mean, I'm not, I know this isn't advanced design. Well, actually, that Sandcastle is kind of advanced design because I could never build that in a million years or design that. But when you're walking down the beach and you see something like that, you're going to say, man, that is awesome. Or maybe it's not awesome, but you're going to say, whoever did that is creative. Whoever did that is intelligent. Whoever did that has some skill. Whoever did that has some creativity and some artistry, right? Because as you know, that sandcastle is definitely designed by a human and it by a human intelligence, right? Then, of course, if you're out in the sand dunes, you may appreciate the world of nature, but you may not be necessarily. It may not be like as clear as like a sandcastle. You may not be like, oh, there's. You may say, well, God created everything, but necessarily you're not seeing a specific design pattern there, right? In those sand in that sand out there, right? Um, so that and the sand dunes, I'm sorry, on the right, the natural. So, obviously there's some things that are more obvious, right? That it's definitely caused from some sort of intelligent being. Same thing with Mount Rushmore. You look at Mount Rushmore, it's like, yes, that took an intelligent mind to do that, to design that, carve those faces, do everything. But then you look at the rest of the Grand Canyon, you may say, yeah, God created that too, like there's a creator behind the Grand Canyon, but obviously it's more specified with the Mount Rushmore thing. There's like a specific outcome. Someone specifically planned those faces out, carved them into the rock, has a very specific structure, sculpture to it, design of the faces, right? It's very specific. Okay. Whereas not quite as specific with the Grand Canyon issue. Not that the Grand Canyon isn't beautiful or anything, but the faces on Mount Rushmore are certainly way more specified, right? Same thing when humans find you know things in caves from a long time ago. They might find a carving, something like this in a French cave they found 37,000 to 33,500 years ago. And they find something like this. They look at it and say, well, it looks like it's designed. It looks like it was drawn on there by an intelligent person or an agent. I don't think it's caused by just like the erosion in the rock or so somehow these things all coming together, like the black on there and the brown and the looks like there's specific faces there of animals of some kind. So they're trying to make a design inference, right? Same thing when in archaeology, they find all kinds of things in archaeology. They find things in the Bible, of course. There's tons of things like this in archaeology in the Bible. They find remains and they know looking at this, it has a very specific pattern on it, right? A seal on the ring. It's highly doubtful that the wind and the erosion and time and could make those design features on a ring. That looks like a very specific design by a specific intelligent agent, right? So at least that's the more rational inference. It seems to be looking at the shape of it, right? And of course, we know that everything around us is designed, just about everything. I mean, everything in your room right now is designed by a mind. It's planned out. I mean, pretty obvious. All universities are planned out by a mind, by design, by an agent. cities, buildings, cars, planes, phones, technology. Of course, that's just very basic. I know that's common sense, but you think about it. If a blind, undirected, you never think like a blind, undirected natural process could think ahead and design a blueprint, collect the proper materials, construct the machine, and process everything in the right order. You wouldn't ever think that, right? We don't think that about anything hardly. And in reality, all around us, there's nothing that fits that category. Okay. Hardly anything. I can't think of anything in my room I'm looking at right now as I look around. Nothing. Everything in my room is not accounted for by a blind, intelligent, or unguided process. It all comes from a very specific, intelligent mind that planned it out and did it. Just like in crime scenes, you find a body, the detective comes in, he's going to say, did the man fall by chance? Was it just an accident? Or was he pushed intentionally by somebody? That's by design. He might even say, was it necessary for this man to fall? But that's what crime investigators do. They look for the effect or the causes behind the effects, right? They see this man laying here, like that's the effect. What's the cause? Was it caused by somebody else? Was it intentional design? Was it designed this way? Or did it just, some guy just randomly fall off a building? I mean, that's what they have to do when they do crime investigations. Now, some of the people have been writing about this, that design intuition, as far as people seeing design in the world around them, starts at a very early age. Like, for example, there's a psychologist here at UC Berkeley, Alison Gopnik. She says here, she's even an atheist too. She says, by elementary school age, children start to invoke an ultimate godlike designer to explain the complexity of the world around them, even children brought up by atheists. That came out in 2014. Then we have another one, Deborah Kellerman, Arts and Science Associate Professor of Psychology, Boston University. She says humans do have strong predispositions to construct beliefs about purpose and function in nature, but it's physical, social, and cultural environments that bring them out. Even though advanced scientific training can reduce the acceptance of scientifically inaccurate teleological explanations, it cannot erase a tenacious, early emerging human tendency to find purpose in nature. That means design. It seems that our minds may be naturally more geared towards religion than science. Okay. There's a book that Doug Axe wrote a ways back. He's a biologist, and he wrote a book called Undeniable. He talks about the design intuition in humans, how we are wired to see design. It starts at a very early age. And he even said here, most preschool children tend to attribute the world around them to a godlike designer at a very early age. They do it intuitively, even though it might be contrary to their parents' beliefs. Now, I don't have time to go to that passage, but I think you guys know in Romans 1 that God, it says very clearly that God has created the world and made it clear he exists through what he has made. It says through what he has made, right? He says is the evidence of his attributes, his power, his eternal nature have been seen through the things that have been made. So Romans 1 is a reality in the world around us. Now, obviously, some people deny God in that passage, like it says, and they turn away from God, and God ends up turning them over to judgment. He gives them their way. But the point is that this design inference is really not that far away from what Paul says in Romans 1. Now look at a couple of atheists, what they say. Francis Crick had a lot to do with DNA research, and he had a big role to play in the discovery of I think the double helix or something like that. When the DNA, he had a lot of work on did a lot of research on the work on DNA. But he said here in a book called What Mad Pursuit, A Personal View of Scientific Discovery, he said biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. So that's kind of interesting. And then Richard Dawkins, the famous atheist, wrote in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, he said, biology is a study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. So, he's admitting that things look designed, but he's saying that it's only just on the surface level. It's not real. They just look like they're designed, but they're really not designed by a designer. They appear to be designed, but they're not designed by a designer. Okay. So that's interesting. But that just shows you that they concede there's some sort of design, but they have to come up with a different explanation for it, right? Now, like I said, that you can certainly if you look at the universe and you look at planet Earth and you look at the first life, you look at the DNA code, which we'll talk more about as the weeks go by, you can look at these features that everybody can observe. You can say, this came from an intelligent cause, or you can say, well, you know what? No, there is no designer behind it. There's no mind, no intelligence, no creator. We are the result of an undirected process, right? An undirected natural process. No planner, no intelligence. It's just you are the result of chance. And always remember, if somebody brings up chance, they say, well, chance things happen. I think it's just chance. Chance isn't a cause, it doesn't do anything. Okay. Chance has no power to do anything. It's just a statistical probability level of something happening without intelligence. Okay. So don't let them like act like chance has some sort of power. Like chance can pull off a universe or chance can pull off all the things needed to get life going. No, chance doesn't do anything. And time doesn't do anything really. They both don't have any power to them. Okay. So sometimes people try to say that, like, oh, just give it enough time, give it enough chances. They think like chance has some sort of power to it. It doesn't. Okay. Now, it is true that when you think about when we look at certain design arguments like, the world, the universe, human bodies, whatever you want to, we look at certain design features, which we'll talk about. It doesn't necessarily mean that all those design arguments point to the God of the Bible. Like you could believe in design arguments and be a Muslim or a Jew or a deist, as I'll talk about. You don't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily get you all the way to believe in the God of the Bible. They're not designed to, no pun intended. They're not, it's only supposed to get you a starting point to start thinking about a creator. Okay. Start thinking about a designer. Okay. And so when someone says to you, well, I don't see how that gets you to Christianity. I mean, I can believe the universe. Like my dad believes the universe is design. He's like, there's too much order to it. He thinks that there's too much evidence. There's some sort of creator because there's too much order. But he hasn't really embrace Jesus, so he's like halfway there, but he's not all the way there, right? He's at the first point. He hasn't gotten the second point. And sometimes you have to get people the first point, right? Start thinking in the direction of a creator, right? You have to start somewhere. And obviously there's people out there that are deists. Deist believes that God kind of created the universe. He got it started, set the initial laws of nature in place, and then he kind of was hands off after that. But that's not I always say to people that deists, like, why do you stop at deism? Like, you don't want to be accountable to God? Because deists don't have to be accountable to God. It's easier to believe that God just wound everything up, got it going, then he's hands off, right? Because now you're not accountable to him. But if you get into God doing things after the universe and intervening into history through Jesus, that's going to create some tensions because then the person would be accountable probably to God if there is a God. He's spoken through the person of Jesus. Okay. Now we know that you guys know that when you have to do a lot of planning to be successful in life. Life just takes planning. Some of us are good planners. Some of us are not good at planning. Some of us have made mistakes. Some of us are getting better at it. Some of us are really good planners. It just depends on who it is. But we have to plan our education because we have to think about our future. What kind of career will I be in? What's it going to be long term? How will it help me make a living? I got to think about how I'm going to spend 4 years in college or 2 years or trade school. Whatever it is, you got to think about your health. I plan health out. What do I need to do to be healthy? What do I need to do so I don't get sick and have to spend a bunch of money in the hospital and get sick? And some things you can't control, obviously. And then we write up wills and plans of retirement. We have to plan ahead for a future that way. And we know the government is all supposed to be about planning, 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 thinking about the future, planning ahead, passing bills, thinking about the future. I know they do it poorly or good in a good way. There are all those debates. But the point is, the government has to plan way ahead of time. They have to plan. And the point is I'm leading to is the fact that if anyone ever brings up evolution to you, you always want to ask them, what do they mean by evolution? And if they want to talk about biological evolution or what we call Darwinism of some kind, you can just always point out to them that before you even start talking about biological evolution, before you even get to that point, you've got to have a universe that's precisely set up for life, a universe that comes into existence that is life permitting. Okay. You can't just have any old universe. It's got to be a life permitting universe, hospitable to life on Earth, allowing life get going on Earth. Okay. Then you've got to, of course, have the right planet. The Earth's got to be set up correctly, right? If you're going to build a planet or build a universe or build a planet, that takes some serious planning. If I was going to go build a universe and say, what kind of universe do I need to build to design it in a way that, helps a planet have life, to get life going on a planet? Like, what do I need to do to get the universe right to begin with? There's one step before the other, right? So you've got to have a right life permitting universe. You've got to have a life permitting Earth. You've got to have the right features on planet Earth. And then that all has to be set up to get life going on Earth, to get the first life, right? And you don't even, unless you get those things in place to get those three things going, you can't even get to biological evolution. You get those three things in place, okay? Because before you get to any biological evolution, you've got to show how life came from non-life. You got to show where a DNA code came from. Then you got to go back to the planet Earth and planet the right planet universe. It just goes on and on. So a lot of planning ahead of time. Now, there is a gentleman we probably have all heard of named Aristotle. I know many of you have not read much Aristotle, and I understand when you think of Aristotle, may give you hemorrhoids. But Aristotle was, obviously the most influential thinkers of all time. His impact on philosophy and other fields of academia has gone on forever. Um, he certainly had a big role in some Christian thinking. Of course, in Western thinking, a huge role. Thomas Aquinas came along and took a lot of his thought and synthesized it in the medieval period. Thomas Aquinas wrote all those, like the Summa and five ways for God's existence and all those things. He took a lot of Aristotelian concepts. So those things are kind of embedded in some sort of Christianity and also in some sort of Western thinking. So his impact has been long, is cemented permanently. But the one thing he did come up with, which is still helpful to this day in talking about God's existence, is something we may not be familiar with. And they're called Aristotle's four causes. Now, these causes, you see them in every part of reality. Okay. It's not like debatable, like, oh, I don't know if I see that. Yeah, they're everywhere around you. Everything in your room is a result of these four causes. Okay. This table that I have my computer on as a result of the four causes. The computer I'm looking at was a result of these four causes. My water bottle, the result of these four causes. Everything. Okay. My phone. So what Aristotle came up with these four causes. One of them is called the formal cause, and that's like the plan. If I was to look at my computer, that would be the idea in the person that designed this computer. It had to be an idea in someone's mind to begin with, right? Like, how am I gonna, what kind of computer do I want to build? What's it gonna be like? Or a house, the blueprint for the house, that's in the mind of the architect, right? I used to build houses. I used to actually go pick up physical plans. Now, of course, you do it all computer. That was the 90s. But anyway, so the point is you have this what's called a formal cause. It's the idea in the person's mind to begin with, right? When he's going to build something. Okay. It has to be in his mind to begin with, the idea or plan. Okay. Then once you get that, then you're going to go build it. Okay. But then you need materials. Okay. If you think about a house, we know the material cause of a house would be all those things, such as wood, lumber, nails, paint, concrete block, glue. Many, many other things go into building a house, right? That's what we call the material cause. All right. So, yeah, the formal cause, that's the architect, the mind and the design in the mind of the architect to begin with, right? Then you have the material cause. Those are the things that are going to be needed to build that house. Then you have what's called the efficient cause. The efficient cause, Aristotle said, is the mind or the agent that causes the change. That's like those people that come along there and they actually take the materials and they build a house, right? They're the efficient cause. It's obvious that if you have a bunch of, let's say you go back here, you come up with a design for a house, right? Say, okay, this is my architect. This idea is in his mind. He comes up with a blueprint here. Now, what do I need to build the house? I have all my wood, lumber, nails, paint all on the job site. Obviously, the wood, lumber, nails, paint, concrete block are not going to pick themselves up and build that house. They're not going to be able to do anything, right? They're just materials. Okay, they're just sitting there. You need something to come along and cause change. The efficient cause comes along, takes those materials and builds it, right? They're the ones that come along and they're called the efficient cause. All right. You need that efficient cause or that house won't get built, right? Otherwise, the materials are just going to sit there for months and your house is never going to get built. And then Aristotle mentioned what's called the final cause. Okay. And what the final cause is the goal for which that house is created, why it was built. Now, some people build houses for different reasons, but let's just say the goal of a home would be ultimately for protection, shelter, just a peaceful place to exist. You may say, well, I'm building it to sell it. All right, that's fine, whatever. The point is that you have a final cause. Okay, so in Aristotle's thinking, you have, let's go back again, you have what's called a formal cause, you have what's called a material cause, you have what's called an efficient cause, and you have a final cause. And you will see those things in just about everything around you. My phone, my water bottle, my computer all had a formal cause, it had a material cause, it has an efficient cause, and it has a final cause. The final cause of this phone is that I may use it for communication, right? Okay. Final cause of this water bottle was made to drink from, right? That's I had someone design this thing in their mind. Then the material is this green plastic, and then efficient cause came along and constructed this, and then the final cause is I may drink from it, right? Anything around you probably has these four causes. Okay. So if you apply this to things like the universe and our earth and other features of the world around us, um, you will find the same thing. Okay. You will find that, let's take like the universe. Okay. You have the material cause of the universe. That's the stuff like the material, like the dark matter, the regular matter, the dark energy, all those material things in the universe. And then you had to have a formal cause. You the idea had to exist in a mind before the universe even came to existence. Okay, that's like the architect, right? He has the idea in his mind. Then you have the efficient cause that comes along. That's the mind behind the universe that actually does the creating, right? Just like those people are the creators of the house, they build it. The efficient cause comes along and builds the universe. He has to do something. Okay. And then the final cause of the universe is that it's hospitable to life, that we have, or it's hospitable to life on earth, right? So if you apply these four kinds of causes to major things like the universe and earth, there's no way to get around that there has to be an efficient cause. The efficient cause is God. Okay. There's no way you can just say, well, I think we've got these four causes and everything else. When it comes to universe, it doesn't need an efficient cause. It just happened by chance. We don't need anyone to come along and take a bunch of dark matter and regular matter and energy and all the other things about a universe. We don't need any efficient cause behind that to do anything. It just happens on its own. Well, that's like saying back here that house with the materials didn't need an efficient cause. That those things like the lumber and the glue and everything just built the house on its own. It didn't need a human body to do anything. It just did it on its own, right? That's the analogy. You understand what I'm saying? So it doesn't make any sense. So I use these four causes with students because when they're atheists or agnostic, I just apply them to everything else in reality. And I say, well, why do you think there's no efficient cause behind the universe? Like you've seen efficient cause and everything else. You've seen efficient cause and everything around you. Like why is there no efficient cause with the universe or the earth or your DNA or this thing over there, that thing over there? Why are you saying that? Why do you suddenly say there's no efficient cause? And it creates an interesting conversation, of course. Now, like I said, you know, just to reiterate on a more basically not so much an Aristotle level, but um, we need the kind of universe we need because we need the kind of Earth we need. If you don't get the right universe, you don't get the right planet. And the question becomes whether God wanted sentient, self-aware, reasoning people on Earth, and that's what He's had to plan ahead for, right? And our Earth is not just like many other planets. Okay, you hear that? Oh, there's so many Earths just like ours out there. Oh, they found an Earth-like planet. No, they haven't. There's no way to even know for sure if it is like Earth. You'd have to actually probably go there and see. It might have some of the same things about Earth, but everything about planet Earth is very unique. Okay. And to say we just found a ton of Earth like planets the exact same is just not being honest. Okay. You can read a couple of those books there if you want to. They talk more about that. So, we have intelligent effects everywhere. Okay. The question is, can they be produced by unguided, mindless processes? All right. I don't think so. Now, a lot of people, of course, say that purposeless evolution is what's got us here. There's no, like I said, there's no biological evolution until you get the right universe and right planet. But some people just think, well, we're just an accident. We're just everything's purposeless. Okay. So if you believe this, then you'd be in the minority because I can tell you most people don't believe this. Most people intuitively believe in a creator. And most people will say to me on a college campus they believe in a creator over no creator. Not all of them, but certainly more than less. Okay. There's to say that the universe was produced by a mindless, non conscious, nominal process, to say that human beings were produced by an undirected, valueless process, or to say that life somehow emerged from non living matter and that all the cosmic constants just happened to be right and given enough time, we just popped out of nowhere. We just got lucky. Would take a lot more faith than to believe what the current scientific data is. Okay. And there's not a lot of debate whether the universe is designed for life. Okay. It's what we call fine tuned. Okay. It's finely tuned, set up a certain way so that life can get going on Earth. Okay. There's been a lot of books written on this. Not a lot of debate whether it's fine tuned. There's also some really good work by these guys. They just came out with their 20th anniversary edition, but they also talk about how the universe is set up for scientific discovery. It's not just set up any old way. It has to be set up a certain kind of way that we can even do science. The way the sun is, away from the earth, a certain distance from the earth and the gravitational pull and how we get eclipses and everything is set up a certain way. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the discoveries we have in science. Okay. Just something to think about. Okay. So the fine tuning argument has always been that it seems like the universe shows advanced planning. There's an advanced plan, which means there's intelligence behind us, and the whole universe shows evidence of advanced planning, and then the whole universe was probably caused by intelligent cause. Not a lot of debate that the universe fine-tuned. Even these guys like these atheists here that I have written here, some of them are atheists. They're not even. Ooh, someone is writing on my slide. What is going on here? Please no drawing on my slide. I'm not sure what's going on there, what you're doing. Uh, but these scientists, even like physicists that aren't even Christians, they believe the universe is fine tuned for life. So the issue is whether, what caused it. Debate is over obviously whether it's caused by an intelligent agent, whether it's, caused by a being with the ability to plan ahead and think ahead with an end goal, or whether, like some people say, it's just a chance accident. Chance doesn't do anything. It's not a cause. Maybe we just got lucky. Or maybe just, there had to be one possible outcome. And just by necessity, we got this universe. It's kind of like chance again. So the debate is over the explanation of the fine tuning. I still don't know how these blue marks got on my slide. I'm kind of interested how that happened. There's a guy named Martin Rees. He's a British physicist, and he wrote in his book called Just Six Numbers a long time ago. He's not a Christian. He says here the mathematics required for human life boils down to six numbers. These numbers were built into the Big Bang and must have precise values. They possess for our world to be hospitable to humans. I'll talk about the Big Bang next week. I'm not going to get into that tonight. Um, and it says there, even if any of the numbers were different, even to the tiniest degree, there would be no stars, no complex life elements, no life. So obviously, this has been the beginning of the universe that came into existence. These constants were put in place, these set values that had to be in place for the universe to be hospitable to life. Okay. Meaning that constants that don't change, these things like I have some of them here. I'll give you a list, like things like the gravitational force, the electromagnetic. Don't worry, trying to understand what all these are. These constants like the gravitational force constant, the electromagnetic force constant, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the cosmological constant, the amount of carbon in the universe, the distance even between like the sun and the earth and planet, the moon and the earth, and the gravitational pull, everything. All these things. These are written in Jay Richards' article online, the fine tuning parameters. But for example, like you have um, physicist journals are writing about fine tuning. The fine tuning argument isn't a religious argument. It's an argument made by physicists. Okay, it started in physics journals, and like Luke Barnes wrote in a book. He's a physicist. He wrote in A Fortunate Universe. He said that the pushback became that that it really became debated in physics. The physicists were the one who were pushing back because they just were really like, oh man, I thought this was all about a religious argument, but actually the physics is really the issue. The physics are can be debated by physicists, right? And so originally there was a lot of debate in physics journals. There still are to this day, but anyway, a lot of it's in the physics. Um, but this guy right here, like Charles Towns, he says here, this is a very special universe. It's remarkable that came out just this way. If the laws of physics weren't just the way they are, we couldn't be here at all. The sun couldn't be there. The laws of gravity, nuclear laws, and magnetic theory, quantum mechanics, and so on just have to be the way they just have to be for us to be here. I maintain the science is closely related to that because science tries to understand how the universe is constructed and why it does what it does. There's certainly a lot more written about that. But the other thing you want to think about, why is the universe even intelligible at all? Why can't we even understand it? It doesn't have to be that way. The universe could just be like chaotic. Okay. Why can scientists do their observation? Why are the laws of nature constant? Why are they, why can they're stable and you can trust them, right? Science, takes off as soon as the universe is created. Without the universe, there is no science. Without the beginning of the universe, there's no science, right? Because you need the laws of nature to do science. So you need to ask sometimes, why is the universe even understandable, intelligible by the human mind? You say, well, it just is. Okay, well, that's not an explanation. Okay, that's just you're just kind of positing an easy way out, kind of like, oh, it just is. It's the way it is. You need to give some, maybe like think a little more. Why is it that way? Does it have to be that way? No, it doesn't have to be that way. It could have been totally chaotic, and we wouldn't be able to observe anything. It would be non-intelligible. Um, so if you think about it, if you think about a fine-tuned universe, a design universe, does it lead to like a personal God? Well, you'd have to think if there is a designer behind the universe, and that's God, which I think there is, you'd have to think whoever designed these features, at a minimum, must have more intelligence, more knowledge, innovative and creativity ability than any human, right? And we do know that intellect, knowledge, and attentiveness and creativity are the result of a personal being, right? Because we all are as humans knowledgeable, attentive. We can create. We have the ability to create amazing things. We have intellect. We have, and some of us obviously have higher learning capacity as others. We can create incredible things. We just all have different abilities. But the point is, we're personal beings, and You'd have to say a personal being had to design the universe. It would take a personal God, not just like an impersonal force like the Star Wars, force be with you. Okay. Paul Davies, he's a agnostic or kind of like a deist, teaches at Arizona University. He's a physicist. He once said that in an article in the New York Times, Taking Science on Faith, he wrote here that all science proceeds on the assumption that nature is ordered in a rational, intelligible way. He said that scientists take the orderly laws of physics on faith, and that those laws are all expressed as tidy mathematical relationships. He then asked the questions he's not supposed to ask. He said, where do these laws come from and why do they have the form they do? He got in big trouble by atheists for writing it. They didn't like it because he's basically saying that science is basically starts out the same place as religion. It's by faith. They don't know where the laws of nature come from. They need those laws of nature at the beginning of the universe so they can do their science. They have a starting point. He's like, you just take it by faith. Like they're just there. You know, the laws of science just happen to be in existence and you get to do your science. But, you know, religious people say that they're created by God, that God put the laws of nature in existence. So they take it by faith. So he basically, you know, took a hard stand on that as an agnostic kind of deist guy. And, but, you know, he just said, look, so we have to take it by faith as well. Physicists have to take it by faith. Those laws are all there for us to do our physics, but we don't know where they come from. Okay. So, anyway, okay. So I think that's about enough for tonight, just getting started on this. I hope that it's provoked some thought. And, you know, we obviously will talk about a lot more arguments for God the next couple of weeks. There's more to it. Oh, I also want to mention Hugh Ross's book, Designed to the Core. In that book, he talks a lot about how planet Earth's core is designed as well. Talks about the features of the core of Earth, something we think about all the time, right? He talks about Earth itself, how designed it is, and that the some of those things are in place, definitely designed by intelligence. He's an astrophysicist. Anyway, okay, so I guess we'll stop there, and maybe we shall chat.